Good. Okay, just a second. I have to, there we go. As you all know, we are going to get news and an update about the Olympic Discovery Trail from Jeff Bohman this morning, and I have some background on him. Jeff grew up in the Chicago area and got his BS in environmental biology from the University of Colorado. And then he had a diverse career of positions in natural resources management and water resources planning and management. This included 11 years working as a national park ranger in Denali National Park, Alaska, 10 years working on the Olympic Peninsula with the U.S. Forest Service, Lower Elwha Clallam Tribe and Clallam County in watershed planning and management, and several other positions in Alaska and on the peninsula. Before retiring in early 2014, Jeff spent his final 9 years working for Olympic National Park on a wide variety of projects within the overall Elwha River ecosystem and fisheries restoration project of dam removal and habitat restoration throughout the lower Elwha watershed. He arrived on the Olympic Peninsula in 1989 and began his involvement with the Peninsula Trails Coalition Board in 1991. Peninsula Trails Coalition is the nonprofit that oversees and maintains the or operates the Olympic Discovery Trail. He's now in his second tenure as Peninsula Trails Coalition Board President, having resumed in 2013. He and his wife, Barb Maines, have 2 adult daughters, and he and Barb are happily exploring the opportunity and variety that dual retirement now offers. So welcome, Jeff, and we're anxious to hear what's new with the ODT.
Thanks, Laurel. And it's nice to see a lot of fellow Rotarian friends. It's not often that I come join you all this time of day, but it does typically reinforce why I'm happy to be a part of the noon Rotary Club. But I do find myself hankering for some Olympic Medical Center hospital cafeteria breakfast at the moment for some strange reason. So I'll just have to cope with that. Thanks very much for giving me an opportunity to visit with you guys and update things. With the COVID stuff and Zooming going on, I have been trying to keep these sort of simple. So you may see me clumsily trying to point to something or another on this backdrop, but you all know the peninsula and geography well enough that I can probably dispense with that by and large. A couple of things, actually, yes, with regard to the friendship dinner, before I get into the trail, I am the coordinator of that program at our First United Methodist Church. And we are guesstimating that maybe sometime about October, conditions will be such that we'll be able to resume. Our decision within the church, both internally within the congregation and more broadly from regional church leadership, leads us to feel as though we aren't really comfortable trying to resume or trying to enlist the good offices of the various teams that do meal prep until we're more or less back at normal. We don't feel as though we can or should be trying to manage that program while also trying to enforce distancing or masking or other sorts of things that are far beyond simply preparing food and supporting that sort of fellowship. So we're guesstimating October, but it's really a wild card, and you'll have plenty of lead time when the time comes, and it's wonderful to be able to rely on the Nor'Wester Club as one of the stalwart groups. So that's that story. And in case I otherwise would have forgotten, thanks to Bill Perrott for your years of managing the bag check. I know Roy has been out there and others. My understanding from Victoria for the marathon this time around, since our Trails Coalition organization sort of is the volunteer crew staffing the starting line area for the marathon, that you guys are somehow or another handling the collection of the checked bags, but I'm going to actually be the transport of it into the staging area. I'm just sort of taking that little thing off of Victoria's to-do list. So if there are details in what's going on that you guys need me to know, please just feel free to reach out to me, and we can fine tune things. And as Bill suggests, we'll look forward to resuming something fully normal in the years to come. So there's this really wonderful regional asset, the Olympic Discovery Trail, that we've been working on for 36 years now, since the railroad left, and 33 years since the Trails Coalition was incorporated. For those of you not so familiar with the basics, it's actually in our Articles of Incorporation and Bylaws from 1988, where the term Olympic Discovery Trail originates. We've been working with, depending upon how you choose to count them, somewhere in the order of 13 to 15 different jurisdictions and agencies and tribes over that time to work toward the vision of a full Olympic Discovery Trail from Port Townsend to La Push. Our best estimate at this time, when it is all done, if all of it is built along the routes that seem most plausible, it'll be about 135 miles long. And right now, again, depending upon what you consider to be completed trail, we have roughly 90 miles built with some exciting new sections, as most of you probably know, having been done in just the last year. We do expect to have some minor additions also added this year, and in the coming 2 to 3 years, some very exciting, significant additions, which I'll talk about shortly. So we're probably still, depending upon the tricky, difficult areas that will take the longest, we're still probably 10 to 15 years away from achieving that full vision. But we've been at it for 30 plus years, and we're just going to keep on going until it gets done. And it's a really wonderful project to be associated with. We have a lot of fun working on things, and the workload is really, really wonderfully diverse, which I'll try to illustrate as we sort of take a tour, if you will, virtually from east to west. I did want to check with you fine folks in terms of when you would like me to shoot for being done, because I could go on for hours, as Steve Zenovic and Laurel and others know. Do you want me to wrap up a little bit before 8 with questions, or do you have an earlier need?
Yeah, Jeff, if you could just keep going until about 10 minutes to 8, and you know, then we'll open it up to questions if you want. Cool.
And don't hesitate if there's a question you feel needs to be posed in the moment. I usually am able to keep track of myself, at least kind of, sort of. All right, so let's start over in Port Townsend, where milepost 0, the gateway to the Olympic Discovery Trail, begins on the waterfront, kind of at the south end of the Port of Port Townsend facility. We are working with the port and have had preliminary conversations with the city, the county, and Jefferson Transit. And we are trying to encourage them to move toward a long-term vision of what that gateway to the Olympic Discovery Trail would look like in the long run. We have encouraged them to think in terms of having something much more robust than what they have there right now, which is really just the start of the trail at the back end of a gravel parking area with a cinder block restroom facility. But we've encouraged them to think in terms of having a space that would allow in the long run for events that might bring as many as 1,000 runners or walkers or 500 cyclists to an event. Those are the sorts of scales of events that we see already in Port Angeles, and we have no doubt that's the kind of thing that we would see originating in a town like Port Townsend. So that's one of many places that you'll hear me talking about sort of long range things that are underway that we try to bring to the table and help the jurisdictions see the full vision of what the trail will be and to prepare for that. It's long been now a case of when we build it, they do come. And so we want to be ready for all of those days that will be coming. So that conversation with them is generally involving designing some portions of the southern end of that port area as they are actually embarking on a kind of a comprehensive management plan update, space for day-to-day use, some sort of integration with that Jefferson Transit park and ride facility over inland a little ways and a way for large numbers of event participants to get back and forth from time to time. So it's just a concept at this point, but it is something of significance going on right there at the eastern end of the trail. There's about 8 miles of existing Olympic Discovery Trail, locally known as the Larry Scott Trail, that extend from Port Townsend to roughly what's called the Four Corners intersection area, that intersection where Highway 20 has an intersection with Discovery Road to the west and Four Corners Road to the east. The actual end of the trailhead is just about a quarter mile west of that intersection. And from that existing trailhead, it's called the Milo Curry Trailhead, down to Discovery Bay, roughly maybe about 11 miles of eventual trail. We're deeply engaged about 4 or 5 years into a long-range effort to get all of that trail built. We refer to it as the ODT Eagle Mount portion of the overall ODT. We helped Jefferson County get funding, and then we helped them select a consultant, and we helped the process work through to develop a set of route options and preferred route alignments that the county is now using as its guide to pursuing the construction. As with any piece of new trail, getting to the constructed trail is a long sequence. It's figuring out where the trail can go. It's looking at what it would take to acquire the necessary property interest to be able to build the trail. It requires actually acquiring that and then designing and eventually constructing the trail. So it's typically a 3-step process. And the county is well along on that 3-step process for the northern piece of that ODT Eagle Mount. The northern piece would connect the Larry Scott Trail at the Milo Curry Trailhead on down to the boundary of Anderson Lake State Park. Our goal, we're looking at that northern 1/3 portion of the ODT Eagle Mount Trail as a single effort. So the county now is well on its way, having entered into an agreement with Rainier Hope for a large part of that northern section. They're in discussions, if not negotiations, with the other property owners, including Jefferson Transit and their facility just north of Discovery Road, excuse me, of Four Corners Road, just east of that intersection. They're in discussions with WashDOT about funding for whatever kind of at-grade pedestrian crossing there would be at that Highway 20 intersection. And we are doing our best to facilitate all of those conversations. Meanwhile, we have taken it on to work with Washington State Parks directly to help them find a way to keep up with the progress that the county is making so that they, within Washington State Park, Anderson Lake State Park, can have their piece of trail through the park completed on the same time frame, so that we have a logical piece of trail extending all the way to and through Anderson Lake State Park, which would complete the northern of those 3 ODT Eagle Mount sections. I wish that I was able to have my big wall map behind me, and my cafeteria pancakes in front of me or whatever, and we could be able to look at these things a little more closely. But I hope I'm not being too detailed, but the geography of all of this is an important dimension to the overall story. The county is embarked on negotiations with the city of Port Townsend for pieces of the alignment for the central section of this ODT Eagle Mount piece, the piece that would go from Anderson Lake Road down to Eagle Mount Road. And then the third section would be from Eagle Mount Road down to Discovery Bay, where I suspect most all of you have seen that recently added, now 3 or so years ago, piece of trail right along the edge of Discovery Bay. That was a really exciting piece of trail to get done because we were able to work with all of the interests working on the restoration of Discovery Bay and the removal of the old railroad pilings and other debris there. And we were able to work with the water line owner for a water supply system, connecting a well field on the east side of the bay to water users on the west side of the bay. So the Olympic Discovery Trail there around the head of Discovery Bay actually has buried underneath it the new replacement water line that used to be hung from that old railroad trestle crossing the head of the bay. So that's just another example of where we come into the picture on these things. We knew we had to get a trail around the head of Discovery Bay, and we knew there weren't going to be many ways to do it. We knew that if it was going to happen, we were going to have to sort of speak up for the trail interest. And ultimately, way back when, 10 years or so ago, we ended up doing a targeted fundraiser because we had to come up with about $60,000, which we did in just a couple of months because it became our responsibility to pay for the additional design and engineering that was needed to add the trail to what otherwise would have simply been a buried water line and a restored shoreline. We're also now very excitedly engaged in building a what we're calling a viewpoint and trailhead that will be right there at the head of Discovery Bay. We had an amazing volunteer, a fellow by the name of Paul Bates, who worked for a number of years incredibly intensively on all of that ODT Eagle Mount stuff. He sadly passed away way too soon. He was a classmate of Norm Dix's. He traveled in really interesting circles with a career in law, and his friends and family have expressed an interest in helping put together something in his honor. That place there in Discovery Bay where it is quite possible that the Olympic Discovery Trail will be met by the really huge Great American Rail Trail that's crossing from Washington, D.C. and has its westernmost segment as the Olympic Discovery Trail. That intersection, if you will, potentially coming westward from the Hood Canal Bridge over to Discovery Bay along the 104 corridor in some fashion, means that theoretically the entire nation full of cross-country trail users will be coming through Discovery Bay. So it's an exciting place to work on, a really noteworthy facility, and we've engaged closely with the Jamestown and Port Gamble Sklallam tribes. We have a conceptual design for a culturally resonant shelter, maybe something akin to what we see in the scenic pullout at Blinn. And we hope to be putting all the pieces together for that and having construction occur next summer after we get through permitting and other preparation. It's going to be a really, really wonderful facility and an appropriate honor for a gentleman who spent literally in 2 or 3 years, somewhere in the order of 3,000 hours. He was spending 50 to 60 hours a week doing different aspects of the preliminaries for all of that ODT Eagle Mount. Continuing west from Discovery Bay, Jefferson County recently acquired from WashDOT about a mile's worth of the right-of-way for the abandoned old State Highway 9 corridor. When you think of your driving along 101 in that area, just this side of Discovery Bay, I'm sure you've noticed off to the north side or the waterward side, that abandoned road. Much of the pavement is still in place. It's got power line along it. And after many years of effort, Jefferson County finally got that piece. The only thing between now and putting it to use as off-highway parts of the ODT are the fact that they've got to work out negotiations with property owners at either end of that piece in order to have it tie in to existing ODT alignment on either side. That's on an unknown timeline, but it was just earlier this year that they finalized the years-long process to secure that right-of-way. So it's one of those places where it'll almost be like flipping a switch. When the bookends get taken care of, the entire shelf will be added. So it's pretty cool. Then we're starting to get into Clallam County. The trail, as you approach Clallam County, makes use of Old Gardner Road. That's part of the long range expectation. We're really pleased that Jefferson County, in partnership with Clallam County, and actually it ended up Clallam County's crew doing the bulk of the work with a little participation from WashDOT, got that little short connector piece that you may have seen right parallel to the highway and just north of the highway that links Diamond Point Road and the Diamond Point Road trailhead that we built to Old Gardner Road without forcing cyclists or walkers out onto the Highway 101 shoulder. That was an important little piece, makes things a lot safer and simpler, both for eastbound and westbound travelers. And that's been a great little resolution to a festering safety problem. Between Diamond Point Road and the tribal campus at Blinn, most all of that corridor is on land owned by the tribe. They took the lead on that new piece of trail that coming westward begins at that Diamond Point Road trailhead and extends about a mile. There are a couple of little sections between there and Squim Bay and the tribal campus that are yet to be done, but one piece of that is on target to be done this year. That's one of the small new additions we'll see this year. And then the other piece along Old Blinn Road is probably on a 2 to 3 year horizon. So it's on the same timeline for construction as the piece that I was describing earlier that will connect down to Anderson Lake State Park. We expect that piece and the piece within the park to be done by 23 or 24 if we can keep things moving. From Squim Bay west, we've got continuous trail all the way to the Elwha River. I think most of you probably are familiar with portions of it. It's a great facility. There are some places that have challenges associated with them. We're trying to fine tune what might be a preferred technique to deal with tree roots when they encroach underneath the trail surface and create washboarding or similar problems. We've got an area of particular difficulty in that regard between downtown Squim and the Johnson Creek Trestle. And also in the Port Angeles waterfront. So that may require special equipment, and so that may be another equipment purchase that we will be looking at. As you may have seen from this morning's newspaper, we're very early in what will be hopefully some very helpful conversations about how to address the waterfront trail and its exposure and risk. Some members of the council think that maybe there is another route for it to go. Of course, that's a question that has to be asked and answered. We feel from at least general route scouting that finding an ADA accessible route that would allow for the kind of trail that the Olympic Discovery Trail is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, and similarly quite costly. And one point that we see that we'll be making is that if you abandon that railroad corridor along the waterfront, you're exposing all of those bluff properties to unprotected eventual impact. We see all over the county places where erosion is gnawing away at bluff frontage property, and those folks have had the integrity of the railroad corridor for over 100 years, and you're going to have to factor in what you would do in lieu of having the railroad corridor and the trail there if you were going to move things somewhere else. So we actually see the trail as being an asset that, in addition to its merits in its own right, can be a means by which to get the funding appropriate to maintain a long-term structure, maybe very different than what the existing trail looks like, that provides both the trail and 21st century shoreline protection that is as sensitive to environmental considerations as possible. So as you can imagine from that little thumbnail, it's a huge subject with a lot of facets, and it's an important conversation to have, and we'll just start having it. So then we get through Port Angeles or into downtown Port Angeles, and from there westward, the city is leading efforts along with many others, the chamber and others, at looking at what the route will be through downtown as a lot of waterfront plans get implemented in the coming years. We've got a beautiful alignment in front of the new Field Arts and Events Center over from basically the truck route further west. The trail is incorporated in corridor planning that the city is doing. we were disappointed alongside the city when they did not get some grant funding that they were expecting that would have completed the funding needed for a realignment of the trail going up Hill Street. The intention, as Steve Zenovic well knows, is to get the trail basically to traverse the face of the hillside, the vegetated bluff slope on the north side of 4th Street, and have it be a more ADA accessible, gently sloping traverse that would emerge up at the top over at Crown Park. The lost grant funding or the unsuccessful grant that the city experienced led them to be on the verge of returning almost $1.5 million to the state for reallocation. But when we were advised by the city that they had lost their funding plan for that, we got together with both the city and Jefferson County. We approached our wonderful trail supporter and well-placed friend, Steve Theringer, and we were able to work out the reallocation of that 1.4 something or another million from the city of Port Angeles ODT project to the Jefferson County ODT project. So that 1.4 million is now part of the funding package that Jefferson County will use to build, to acquire, design, and build that piece of trail from Four Corners down to Anderson Lake State Park. So just another example of the multifaceted ways that we as a nonprofit sort of step in to work with jurisdictions and try to see the big picture and put the pieces together and help make it happen. That was a really exciting development, and we're looking forward to seeing that piece of trail over in Jefferson County get done. We got great trail going west along the railroad grade out to the Elwha River. And from there west, there's still big chunks to be done, as many of you may know. But there's exciting progress going on there. The history of the trail is taking advantage of when opportunities present themselves, building a piece of trail, even if it's orphaned for a period of time. And then there is a motivation to find a way to adopt that orphan, to connect that orphan to the next adjacent piece of trail. And there's a perfect example of that between the Elwha River and Joyce, between Freshwater Bay Road on the east and Townsend Road on the west. Property owners out there using abandoned railroad grade as their own private road approached the county wanting help to maintain the road. The county said, well, if you let us incorporate a trail, a part of the ODT as a part of what we renew and upgrade for your road, we'll agree to take care of it. So that's what's now in place as of last year, another wonderful, if short, additional piece of trail. But if you got the time, go out to Freshwater Bay Road, turn north, go about a quarter mile right there at that steep bend when it flattens out, and you'll see taking off westward there, one of the newer pieces of the Olympic Discovery Trail. And it's a wonderful little piece. The neighborhood loves it. And it's the kind of thing that helps now get further work done towards tying it in. The county is making some progress for a piece of trail toward that connecting over there, a piece that would get from the Elwha River, crossing the pedestrian deck underneath the vehicle deck on that Elwha River Bridge, and connect it over as far as Place Road, and get another piece done. That might be coming in the next year or two. It's going to take a longer time to get other pieces between the Elwha River and Joyce done. That's probably one of the two last areas that'll get all filled in. But you've certainly at least heard, if not seen and experienced, the wonderful progress west of Joyce, the completion of the very exciting Spruce Railroad Trail, the opening of those 2 tunnels, the surprising, well, unsurprising in some ways, the landslide that closed it for a while. This is a great story that I just have to tell for a sentence or two. Federal Highways, as a part of evaluating that whole upgrade and the renewal of the railroad corridor, one of the elements of their studying was to look at the landscape and to rank what they saw as the long-range risks of some sort of slope failure and some sort of encroachment on the trail. The place where that slide occurred was only ranked 41st on the entire list of places where the landscape suggested that there might be some sort of slide. So we know that that's a dynamic part of the trail. It often is that sort of thing when you're dealing with such a scenic and mountainous and forested landscape. But it's an incredible piece of trail, and if you haven't been out there, I urge you to get out there. The fact of that opening is known nationwide. We, in another of our dimensions, we were deeply involved in trying to get the National Rails to Trails Conservancy on board with carrying the Great American Rail Trail vision and alignment beyond Seattle and getting out to the Pacific, because the ODT was so far along and represented a Western opportunity, a Western segment opportunity. And it took a little doing, but we were successful. And in the last 2 years, since we were named, if you will, included in the concept, all kinds of national attention is coming this way to various parts of our progress, but particularly to the Spruce Railroad Trail. That gets us over to the Solduck and beautiful trail from up at the crest of that Fairholm or Solduck Hill, where the trail has crossed over to the south side, kind of up over there, and the trail gets out all the way to co-location along Mary Clark Road and out to Highway 101 at Sappho. From Sappho to Forks, that's one of the longer term areas that'll be taking a while to figure out the route and working things out with predominantly forest land ownership. But then in Forks and westward is kind of the other end of the exciting progress. We've got the exciting progress going on over in the ODT Eagle Mount side between Port Townsend and Discovery Bay. And on the west side from Forks out to the Pacific, the county and Olympic National Park have all of the funding in place. And the trail is, I will say, in line to be built. The county's working out the final realty stuff with landowners. The construction funding, design funding is all in place. We'll see that roughly 11-mile piece from Forks to La Push. It should be done by 24 or 25. So huge progress at both ends, lots of exciting things going on in the middle. A really diverse set of things for the Peninsula Trails Coalition to work on. Our trail adopters, our Tiger Team crews, our tractor, we've got 2 tractors and a brush and mowers, and we do it all as volunteers. Many of you have been wonderful volunteers on Things with the Trail, and we're deeply grateful for that. We know we've got too much work to do to keep going as all volunteers. We're getting very serious about trying to build our organizational capability. We figure in the long run, we need to have 2 or 3 staff positions. So we're hell-bent to build our fundraising base. who knows what that'll look like in years to come, but we're very grateful for the membership and support that the community provides to what we do. And I'm really happy to have chances like this to come and tell groups like this what's going on. And so I think I've sort of gotten to my mark. And I'm happy to spend however long any of you want to spend talking about stuff.
Well done, Jeff. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Jeff?
It's not a question for Jeff, but I just want to comment, Jeff, with your leadership and involvement and your enthusiasm, it's been a major project and I've been enjoying being part of it. So keep up the good work and we'll try to help whenever we can.
Thanks, Roy. We've got a really good board, but there is a lot of work. It is all fun though. And it's wonderful that it puts us out in the field working on fence posts or bag checks or whatever it might turn out to be with wonderful people. Even if I can't buy my Filson hat from them anymore.
Jeff, this is Grant. I got a question for you.
Hey, Grant.
Just, I saw that article in the paper this morning
Yeah.
about realigning the trail, and I use that trail a lot. I walk it, I ride my bike. It's a wilderness trail right next to the city, you know, with wildlife, and it's really a gorgeous piece of trail. I'd hate to see us try to relocate that trail. I think the little bit of money we need to spend down there to maintain it, that's the place it should be.
I appreciate that sentiment, Grant, and we certainly do have the feeling that that would be the predominant sentiment. But we understand and we respect the concern for allocation of city resources. And we don't want it to be a question that gnaws at the larger subject of taking care of the trail, theoretically, wherever it may be. So we're happy to go through the process. We've been trying really hard to get the city to step up. I mean, the reason we're in this problem is because that piece of trail has not been cared for adequately since the railroad left. They maintained it fine for decades. It just hasn't been given the level of attention that with the proper care and feeding over the past 30 years, we wouldn't be in the position of having half a dozen locations where the next winter storm could just blow out the trail. Where if there hadn't been an annual program of ditch maintenance and culvert clearing to maintain the flows on the inland side, you wouldn't have the land slumps that compound the problem. So we're very prepared to have that conversation. And to us, it really becomes more along the lines of what I suggested earlier. Not only do we have this incredible trail that has value, but we want to be doing the right thing along the shoreline and the right thing for all of those bluff frontage properties. We got a $1 billion facility at Olympic Medical Center that needs to be cared for. We don't want the slope below the hospital, you know, wearing away any further than it already does. That needs more attention. So we would really hope to see the trail used as a very beneficial additional element of addressing what to us is really the question, which is how to properly make use of the water frontage and the need for bluff protection and recreation, and combine all of those into some sort of, call it the 21st century solution to addressing that problem. There are municipalities, waterfront municipalities all over Puget Sound who've recently done incredible walkways and trail sections along and over waterfront frontage. So the question as presented in the recent city council discussions might have been a little bit narrow and maybe a little bit sort of impetuous. We got a problem here, so let's figure out how to move somewhere else. But we think it opens the door to the larger conversation, and we share your thought, Grant, that it's a resource we don't want to lose, but there's ways we can really take advantage of it. Thanks.
Jeff, it occurs to me that perhaps, at least politically, part of the problem is, and I was on the Parks and Rec Board way back almost 40 years ago when the decision was made to for the city Parks Department to manage that section of the trail all the way out there, even though it was way outside city limits. But it seems that I hear that question. Well, we have limited money, we have limited resources. I think they're down to 2 staff on the city parks right now, full time. Maybe it's time to turn that whole section back over to the county.
Well, we will have, and this may be a very narrow consideration that others wouldn't bring to the table, but when we as the Trails Coalition look at the overall care and feeding of the entire Olympic Discovery Trail, as Councilman French made pretty clear in his remarks, it's a collaborative effort by all of those jurisdictions and agencies, and it doesn't serve, I think, anybody's interest very well if we have jurisdictions trying to pawn off their responsibilities on other jurisdictions. Yeah. We would rather see each jurisdiction pridefully take ownership and successfully care for its piece of the larger asset. In the case of the city and its piece, sounds like well the history of how the city became the owning jurisdiction as it goes beyond the city limits. And certainly in some context, maybe there's reason to renegotiate that. But to us, where a big part of the city's problem lies is that underlying decision to think of it as a recreational asset and a park and put it under the management responsibility of a department that does have such limited resources. Pretty much anything that the trail needs to be done, we go to the Parks Department to ask them to do it. They say, oh, well, wait a minute, we got to talk to Public Works and get the engineers to do this or do that. Right. It's a transportation corridor. Its funding comes from non-motorized transportation and ADA accessible funding grant sources. And maybe that's, and we have made that point repeatedly over the years, that it's, in our view, misplaced within the city's governance. And maybe that's another part of what will emerge from a renewed round of discussions.
That makes sense. Certainly the way the county has been able to be so successful is with Rich James and his passion, but as a transportation corridor, that's where all the money comes from. Absolutely.
And the county has wonderful expertise to do it. And we were on the verge of having the city repeat its interlocal agreement with the county that they put to use to do those emergency repairs 2 winters ago, to engage the county this past March, April in taking care of the current problems that have either not been taken care of or that emerged this past year. And for reasons we don't understand, that fell apart. But a long range scenario might well be that the county has crew capability and periods in their schedule each year where they could certainly be the party that does the work through an interlocal agreement with the city that has the jurisdictional responsibility and brings the funding to the table. The cost is less than the city going through all of the effort to do competitive bidding and contracting year in and year out. So absolutely. And that transportation corridor had over 300,000 trips on it last year. There's a traffic counter at the Red Lion area there, buried in the trail. That gets a lot more use than many of the city's roads. And when you think of the amount of funding that's put into city roads versus the trail as a transportation corridor, when you think of how much money the city puts into City Field and the economic results that come from the use of City Field, I would bet you dollars to donuts if you look at it. The economic benefit of the Olympic Discovery Trail to Port Angeles is far greater than Civic Field. So I think there's a lot of dimension to this larger subject, and we're happy to engage in those conversations, and we're grateful for the community support for the trail where it is.
Jeff?
So Jeff, Chris wanted to work. He asked me to close out here. First off, Jeff, thanks a million for your service and your leadership and making this dream become reality. So it's all of us are using it for sure, and it's a wonderful, wonderful trail. And we
Enjoy
appreciate
your
everything.
neighbors and use it in good health. And if you don't know where to find us, if you have any questions, many of the folks on here have my contact information, or you can go to Olympic Discovery Trail on the web and find us that way. Thank you, all of you, for your interest and support and the volunteer blood, sweat, and tears that many of you provide. We love working with Laurel on our brochures and things. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful community effort. Thanks for the time.
For
And
sure.
Jeff,
Jeff,
thanks
thanks.
for your leadership.
And then we'll be receiving an email from Norm about the upcoming hike this week. So great stuff happening. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Take
Thank you,
care,
Jeff.
everybody.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Everybody enjoy your weekend. Take care.